this tutorial, we're going to make an ice cube tray. So we're going to start off with a very basic primitive, and we're going to go through and make some adjustments and refinements so that we have this sort of ice cube tray. We're going to be going so that we have the 7 receptacles across and 3 going back. Right? So if we start with a basic plane, just like a flat plane, and we make sure that it has 6 edges connecting across and 2 connecting going back, that's going to give us the right number of receptacles. And then we'll use some different tools like Extrude and Inset and Outline in order to build it. And then we're going to want to end up with this little lip on it. We're not going to worry about rounding the corners or rounding out the edge out here. Right, this is basically what we're going for. So I'm going to go to 3ds Max now, and I'm going to start off by doing render setup. I'm going to make sure this is set to scanline renderer, and then just click close, and then I'll just make sure customize unit setup, system unit setup, make sure that 1 unit is equal to 1 centimeter, and click OK. If you've done a couple tutorials with me by now, then most likely your units will always be set up the same way. I'm going to try and figure out a way to get the default render setup to be scanline, and then we won't have to do that every single time either. Alright, so let's jump into this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off by making ourselves a plane. So I'm going to click here in perspective to make that active. And I'm going to come over here to the create panel. I'm going to go to plane, and inside here I'm going to open the rollout for keyboard entry and enter. I'm going to leave X, Y, and Z as 0, so that the origin of the object is at 0. I'm going to change the length to 100 and the width to 200 and click create. Right, and what that does is that makes a plane for me here in the world. I'm going to come up here and click on default shading. I'm going to click on edged faces so I can see the edges of my model. I'm going to come in and turn off grid. I'm going to come here to modify now, and I'm going to reduce my length segments to 1 and my width to 1. Right, so now we don't have to worry about how many segments are in there. Let's just take this guy, right click on it, and say convert to editable poly. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to click on the short edge and click on the word ring. Right now I'm here under edit poly, I'm in edge, and I'm looking for the rollout called selection, and that's where you have an option for ring. When you do that, let's take this little guy here. I'm going to float him back up at the top. You don't need to worry about him yet. We'll get to him in the future. There we go. So if you look in the top, you see that I have my 2 edges. I could just region select, since this is a flat plane, to make sure I have those 2 edges selected. I'm now going to find a rollout for edit edges. Now, your order in which your rollouts are organized is probably different from mine, and so you may need to collapse your rollouts until you find the rollout for edit edges. And if you notice, there's a little grid on the corner. That means you could select that and move them around to reorder where those are. Like, say I wanted to move edit geometry here above soft selection, I can just move it up. Alright, so back to our model. Let's make sure we have our edges selected. I'm just going to click on 1 edge and then click ring, and that gets the parallel edges. Now if I go to edit edges, I'm going to click on the little settings dialog next to the word connect. When I do that, you can see it connects it with 1 edge. I have this dialog here, and you can see I could change the number of segments I'm adding. So I'm going to change this to 2 and click OK. Now that operation there, selecting a ring and connecting it, is one of the most powerful options that you have for 3D modeling, because it's a way to go through and make sure that you're building what we call a clean model. As much as possible, you want to make sure your model is made out of 4 sides and not out of what we call n-gons, which are polygons that have more or less than 4 edges on them. Alright, so I'm going to click on one of these long edges. I'm doing that here in perspective. You could do it in the top as well. Either way, but you want one of those long edges. And again, I'm going to go to my selection rollout and click ring to grab all the parallel edges. And I come back over to edit edges and open settings. And now I'm going to increase that number to 6 and click OK. You can see that we now have 7 receptacles across and 3 back, just like the picture of the ice cube tray. So now I'm going to go to Polygon, and I'm going to select everything, but now I'm going to hold my Alt key and click on the edges, those polygons right there, because remember there's little thumb handles there, so we only want to get these polygons right here. So I have those, so now I'm going to do Inset. So over here under Edit Polygons, which again, your rollouts may be in a different order, you may need to rearrange them, or just collapse until you find them. I'm going to click on the dialog next to Settings. You can see I can click and drag on the spinner and that moves it in. And so what we're doing is we're building the outer, that kind of upper lip. So I'm just going to get it about 3 units and click OK. And so now what I want to do is I'm going to click here in the top corner of my top view and say hide the grid. So click on show grid and that turns it on and off. And I'm going to click maximize viewport. So we want to have nice square receptacles, which we don't anymore as a byproduct of our tool we just used. So I'm going to come into Edge and double click on these edges, and that gets the entire loop, but you see it stops when we get to an edge that has more than 4 edges. So I'm going to hold Control and click on these edges here, and I'm going to find my Edit Geometry rollout, and there should be an option for Make Planar. I'm going to make it planar along Y. You see how that straightens it out? So now I can come up here to move. I can move this up so that we keep the same thickness going around on our lip. And so now if I do the same thing down here, double click on that edge, hold Control to click on the edges out here. I'm going to come back over to that Edit Geometry and make that planar along Y. And just move that down just a little bit. And then the same thing here. I'm going to double click on this guy, hold Control, double click on the one on the bottom, and then just manually click on this one edge. Because again, because there are more than 4 edges, double clicking to select a loop doesn't work. So now because we're going left-right, you can see down at the bottom left corner, that is our x-axis. And so we want to make it planar along x, and then we can move that over. Let's do that again. Click on this edge, double click the one above, double click the one below, make it planar along x, and then we just move him over again. All right, so now we're in pretty good shape. Some of these aren't necessarily square, so I switched to vertex mode over here. Now I can just manually select and just move this down to make these, and move this one up a little bit to make them a little bit more square. All right, I think that's looking really good. These guys maybe come over just a little bit more. All right, those are square enough, those will work. So now let's switch to Polygon. And now I'm going to go from select to move. I'm just going to click on select because I want to select all the little receptacles on the inside. So I need to hold Control and I'm clicking and dragging, and see how it's making a little marquee. I just want to get all the receptacles on the inside. Okay. Now I'm going to come back up here to the top and click on Restore Viewport. And now we have our perspective view here. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm on Polygon. I want to go to Edit Polygons. I'm going to click Extrude. But I'm going to click on the little settings dialog next to it. You can see by default Extrude extrudes up. And we're just going to click and drag that down. And we want to take it down maybe like a negative 2.5, just a little bit. And we're going to click OK. So that brings down all of our little tray, all of the outside. We got a nice lip on it. I'm going to go back to Inset now and open the settings. Right, and inside here, I'm going to change it from the default of group by this little guy here. We click on that, and that changes it to by polygon. So you see now each one of those, it's insetting individually. And Inset takes the polygon and moves it in by a numeric amount. Let's decrease that value to, like, I'm just typing in like 1.5, and I think that's going to be perfect. There we go. So now we have all these individual little trays. Let's click Extrude again. I'm just going to click OK. Right? I have it, it's extruding. What I could do is right click in the front viewport and then switch to move by coming up here to select and transform. And now I can just move these down as far as I want. So you see how they're all dark like that? What I'm going to do is come over here. I'm going to create or there's create to build stuff, modify, which is where we are modifying our object. I'm going to come to display, which is the second one from the right. That's a little monitor, and I want to collapse rollouts until I find display properties, and inside there I'm going to turn on backface cull. All right, so if I turn that back off, you could see that some polygons are lit, whether you see the color, and other ones are dark. That's because the Max in this current version displays the back side of the polygon as dark. It's not lit, only the front gets lit. Let's turn that off because this is how a game engine would actually see it. It just won't draw the back side of the face. So now we see that's kind of our model how it is. And don't worry about the fact that there's nothing on the outside. We're going to deal with that in a little bit. For now, let's go back to Modify and go into Polygon. So I want to select all those little polygons at the very bottom. So I'm going to just hold Control and Region Select. And I'm going to hold Alt and Region Select just the top. Another option is if I region select all the bottom here, and if I find my, under Polygon, I find my selection rollout, I believe I can click Shrink to shrink it down to those polygons that are just on the bottom. I did Control R to get into orbit. Alright, so here's these polygons. I'm going to come back over to Edit Polygons, and now I'm going to use Outline. If I click on that, you see how that kind of starts to push things in? That has a little settings dialog here as well. I can click and drag that in because ice cube trays kind of taper in a little bit. I'll bring that in a little bit and click OK. Might be a little tall. I'm going to right click to make this active and raise these up. Alright, so we're almost done here. Last thing we want to do is we want to get a little bit of an outer lip. So I'm going to go to Border and click on the border, and I'm going to say Cap. Cap it off. Now if I orbit around, you'll see there's nothing, doesn't look like there's anything, but if I go down and orbit, you see there is a big polygon on the bottom. So if I go to polygon mode, I should be able to, let's switch to just select here, because I don't want to accidentally move anything. If I click, nothing happens because I'm only I'm not in the sub-object. There we go, now I'm in the sub-object. If I click, I should be able to click on that polygon. You may need to click more than once if you're hitting the backside of another polygon, but now I have this polygon selected. So what I want to do with him selected is I'm going to come back up here to Extrude, and I'm going to actually extrude him down. So let's drag that value down a little bit because we want to see a little bit of the lip, and you can kind of see what you're doing over here in the front. And so I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to open up Outline, and in Outline I'm going to drag this out a little bit, because what I want to do, and I'm rolling my middle mouse wheel, you can see that I'm pushing those polygon edges out to give it a little taper out, and I click OK. Now I'm just going to hit delete because I don't really need to keep that anymore. If I orbit around, you can see here's our ice cube tray. Now to finish it off, we want to find a modifier called shell. So I'm going to click on the arrow and drag down. I want to find shell. Shell duplicates every single face on your model. So I like to set the outer amount to 0 and then set the inner amount to like 1. And so now you can see that I have polygons on every single side of the model. I can make that permanent by right clicking and saying convert to edit poly. Right? Last thing I'll do is I'll just save this as B Nauman or Nauman B ice cube tray, and you'll obviously save that with your own name. Take a snip. If I click and say snipping tool, I'll just want to get an image of it, save that, and turn that in.